knows, but
I don't have any plans to necessarily stop with 10, so hopefully we can keep going.
do you have any plans in the works for other series after Chicagoland?
I have a lot of ideas for other series. I have a day job, so the one series that right now is, and that's one reason why there's not going to be any additional Dark Elite books, is because it's so much easier for me to write one series at a time because of the day job. I have always imagined, since I first came up with the idea of merit of doing like a second generation, Chicagoland Vampires like the second generation, which I think would be a lot of fun. And I imagine that being a little more romantic, a little bit darker, because I think relationships between humans and vampires in Chicago will have continued to deteriorate. And I already actually have some scenes written for that with the new cast and crew that I imagine coming up once this current group has retired, relatively speaking. So that would be that's kind of the next big thing I'd like to work on. Yeah?
Can you tell us about how you started?
Sure. I actually did not start writing until 2005. I never considered myself to be a writer. I don't have a degree in English. I took one writing class in college, and that was African novel, which was a great class, but not like much for the basics of English composition and how to plot things out. I went to a liberal arts school, so and I actually had this really great fear of writing. I didn't think that I could do it. I had jobs over the summer where I worked in lawyers' offices, and I would see them go into their offices and close the door because they had to write a brief. And I thought, oh my God, that is the worst thing to write on a deadline, and people are going to read it. There's a lot of pressure. And then I got married, and the marriage basically fell apart. And the way that I coped with that was by reading every Regency romance and paranormal romance that I could find. In 2005-ish, there weren't that many out there. It was like Dark Hunters were kind of the king of the worlds. I don't even know if J.R. Ward might have had one or two books, I think, out at that time. But it was really early in the days of vampire fiction. Anita Blake was out there, obviously. Still like book 7, 8, not before the switch kind of occurred, the transition. And eventually, I was so in love with the Dark Hunter series and the world that Sherilyn Kenyon created in New Orleans that I decided I would write fan fiction, which lasted about a week. And I created this character and imagined how she might interact with Sherilyn's characters. And I thought, well, this is fun, and I really like the idea of plotting this novel, but it's kind of not very efficient from a writing perspective because I can't do anything with it. By that time, even though I had majored in English, I had done a lot of writing professionally, and liberal arts colleges, you have to do a lot of writing. Every test is an essay test, essentially. So I thought, well, I'll try my hand. I wrote one in what I imagine would be a series of 7 true paranormal romance novels. It was really not very good. And then I got an idea for Merit, and I can get into the details of kind of how that conceptualized, because that's really, it's so stupid. It's a really stupid story. The idea was really bad. But I wrote that first book in, I think, 2006, edited it, wrote it in about 6 months, or maybe 4 months, edited it in about 6 months, sent it off to Penguin, and they bought the first 2 books about 6 months later. So my road to publication was very, very short, thankfully, but it was not anything that, 2 years before I started writing I would have ever imagined that I would do, just because I had such a fear of it. But once I knew how to put sentences together, then the fear kind of went away. I mean, writing is still hard and very scary in its own ways when you have writer's block or you have to be creative on demand. That's really difficult. But I don't fear that I won't be able to literally write the thing that I need to write. So that is kind of helpful. The Merit story, if you guys want to hear it, this is really so bad. So I have always wanted to be a singer, and I cannot sing worth a damn. I imagine myself to be a grand diva in my car. So I decided when I started, I decided I wanted to write about vampires. And I imagined that Merit was the singer in this band, and this is totally true. Like, there are scenes written. She goes, in the first scene of this book, she goes to audition with her blue-haired drummer Mallory at a club, and the club owner is very mysterious, and he does not give them the respect that she thinks they deserve in the band audition. So after the audition, she goes to confront him in his office backstage, and learns that he's a very handsome brunette named Morgan Greer. As she's leaving the office, she's attacked by a vampire and made a vampire. So you get at least the only thing really, the kind of the three people involved, and the fact that she's made a vampire fairly early on stuck. But really, it was very silly, and it really didn't have a plot, and I kind of just trudged along. And then all of a sudden, I can't remember where I was or what I was doing, but I had this image of this blonde vampire just kind of standing there straight on and looking forward. And I knew immediately who he was. He didn't have a name yet, and it took me a little while to figure out that Ethan was his name. But once I knew who he was, I knew who Merritt needed to be in contrast with him and how they would have to fight and kind of battle against each other. So that, once I knew who he was, I started over from scratch, basically, with Mallory and Morgan, obviously, still playing parts, and wrote the series from there. And the first book, again, I wrote it in about 4 months. Got a contract with Penguin for 2 books, and then when that was up, I got another one, and when that was up, I got another one, and I'm writing number 8 right now. Biting Bad is number 8. It will be released in August. And number 9 will be called Wild Things, and it will be released in next February. So we're on about every 6 months publication right now, although I'd like to move that back to 9 months so I can see my husband because of the day job thing. So we'll see. But anyways, that's the long road to publication story. Yeah.
Did the idea of Ethan come up after you saw like an underwear
commercial
no, of David Beckman?
2006, so I don't think H&M even had I don't think the commercials were out yet. And I don't know, I don't recall if I knew if I had David Beckham's face in my mind. I do now. But at the time, I just knew he was kind of underdressed, let's say, in this particular image. Not in a lascivious way, he just happened to be. And he had the golden like, shoulder-length straight hair. And I just knew, it was the look in his eyes, really, that kind of imperious, what do you think you're doing? I know best. Kind of stubborn control freak thing about Ethan. That's the part that I knew and kind of grabbed onto. Originally, I was looking for names, and I looked for a really long time because I knew I wanted something that had like a long vowel sound that was a little punchy. Ethan, I think, is very punchy. But I was trying Jason and some other names that really didn't fit until I got to Ethan. And then I saw David Beckham in the underwear ad, and I thought, that's him. That's the face to match everything else that I had in mind. But not the voice, because his voice is it's a little high-pitched. It has a very strong, like, Cockney English accent. It just doesn't fit my image of Ethan, so. But anyways, and the rest is history.
Did you get an agent, or did you have to have an agent before this interview? How did that work?
I was I don't know how much they do this anymore in the days of self-publishing, but I was picked out of a slush pile. I sent in, according to Penguin's guidelines, the first 3 chapters in a query letter. About 2 months after I sent it in, I think, 3. June, September, I got a request for the full manuscript. I sent that along. In December, and this is all probably 2006. December of 2006, I knew I was going to New York in January for a work conference, so I emailed the editor and said, hey, I don't know if you would be interested in talking, but I will be in town. And she emailed me back and said, yes, I would be interested in talking. I will call you back tomorrow. And I had gotten to New York, and she called and made an offer on the phone for the first 2 books, which was phenomenal. It was one of those phone calls that I will always remember. It was awesome. But once I had the deal done, I got an agent with the deal in hand. Now, in most cases, you go with the deal in hand, but not having signed the contract, so the agent can read through it, make sure all your rights were protected. And it's not like Penguin doesn't have egregious contracts or anything. There were a couple of things that I would have changed if I'd done it over again. But it was easier. There's kind of a chicken or egg thing with agents in publishing. A lot of people, I think, do it the other way around. You get an agent, and the agent does the hard work of selling the book. But in this case, it just worked that I had a publisher and then got the agent afterwards. So my submission to Penguin was very specific because there were a lot of books that I read that the particular imprint that Penguin published, I really liked Rachel Kane's Weather Warden series. Love that series. It's one of my all-time favorites. And my the imprint had done those books as well, and I thought it was a good kind of strong female heroine match. So, was there whistling somewhere about that? Okay. So anyways, I targeted and sent it to the publisher that way, and then got the agent later on. It's not a hard and fast rule. That's just kind of what worked for me. Was there a question over here, I think?
I did.
Yeah.
Where did you come up with the silver eyes? Because I noticed a lot of books go for Vampires World besides gold.
I don't know if I hadn't read the gold thing or the silver eyes thing. I just knew I wanted them to have some obvious visual sign of their kind of intense emotion. So I just picked silver because I like silver better than gold all the time, honestly. I just like silver the best. And I didn't want to pick a color because that seemed confusing to me. So silver seemed kind of neutral enough to work for everybody. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? I mean, you just sit down and just start, or?
I procrastinate a whole lot. Well, let me break it down from a timing thing. So I publish 2 books a year, and so if you break the year, you have basically 6 months per book. 3 months of that is spent editing. 3 to 4 months is spent editing the prior book, which means you have 2 to 3 months to write the next book. A good 3 to 4 weeks of that first is me in a panic state of procrastination and not doing anything. So if any of you are writers and you have that, totally normal. Not even a big deal. I have certain strengths, perhaps because I don't have an English or creative writing degree. I am pretty good at writing dialogues just straight out that doesn't have to be altered very much. Plotting is really not my strong suit because I have a very random thought process and plotting is very linear. So my editor and I have to work with that a lot along the way. Right now what I do is give her about a 1-page synopsis before I start writing. 1 single-spaced page that kind of discusses each of the plots of the book and what's going to happen, like the romance plot, the GP plot, the mystery plot. And we'll talk about it and finesse it a little bit and make sure it makes sense. And then I will actually start writing. I used to write books kind of randomly. I would do a scene here and a scene there, however it occurred to me. That was mostly because I'm on such a short deadline that I have to write every day, and I have a minimum word count that I have to accomplish, usually between 1,000 and 1,500 words. And for me, when I have to make myself write, I need to at least have the freedom to write about what I want to write about. So I would pick scenes randomly, and then when I got about halfway through the book, or a little under halfway, I'd start back at the beginning and start tying everything together. That's not a very efficient way to do things, and it really, you don't end up, the first draft doesn't end up being very cohesive. And you also, I personally forget things that I have written, so I'll write a scene in which Ethan and Merritt are arguing about something, not remembering that I had already written that scene like a month ago and forgot about it. So what I'm doing now is starting at the beginning and writing straight through. I think I end up having to, the goal is that when I finish writing the book, because I do it so quickly, is that I don't want to have to, in the editing process, chop off 20,000 words that are irrelevant or that are duplicative, that don't make sense, the way that I've written them. This last time around, I'm editing Biting Bad right now, and I think it did, writing from a linear way, I think does help that, because the scenes have to make sense because you're putting it directly after something and directly before something else. It's not just writing random. I think in 2 days, Merritt's going to have to go do XYZ, so I'm going to go ahead and write that. So it's really a change from the way that I used to write it. But the goal is that the editing process goes a little bit smoother, just because of the deadline. That it also is very compact. So that's generally how it goes. Yeah.
Is your editor a person who does just this kind of genre? How does that work?
She does everything. My publisher is New American Library, is the imprint I'm under at Penguin. My editor, I can't remember if she does Ace and Rock too. I think she does, which are the mass market paperbacks for Penguin. She also does Cozy Mysteries, which is kind of happier mysteries involving a theme, like the cooking mysteries or the recipe mysteries or the knitting or scrapbooking mysteries. She also does military science fiction, and she does, I think, a little bit of other urban fantasy paranormal romance, but I don't think that's I don't think that's the bulk of what she does. I think she does mostly these other kinds of things. So
Did they pick her for you, or did you?
she picked me out of the slush pile. And it was, I don't remember if I sent it to her per se. I don't know if the letter had her name on it. But she picked me as somebody she wanted to edit and publish. And that's how it goes. So if you guys like these books, it's totally because of her, because they are messes when I turn them in. Honestly, I don't intend to make them that way. But again, because my thought process is so random, what she is able to do is make sure, every book is supposed to have an arc of some kind. There are things that happen, they kind of raise to a climax, you don't know how to fix it, and then, we fixed it, and everybody's happy in the end. And mine don't always do that in the right kind of order, so she helps me put the things back into place. My first drafts are also really kind of soap opera-esque. There's a lot of slamming of doors and screaming, and for some reason, when I first start writing, that's just kind of what comes out. I guess it's entertaining to me, kind of mentally. But she helps calm that down and make sure that people are Merritt is acting as Merritt would act, and not like Selena would act, I guess. So that's very helpful.
You write the people you know in real life?
No, I write sayings and mannerisms. I keep a notebook and I'll make notes of things. I'll write down names if I like them. I do have a lot of comments. People say often that they think Merritt is very much like me because we both are sarcastic. We kind of have a similar outlook on life. My boyfriend of a couple of years ago, who is now my husband, sat down and read like the first 3 or 4 books fairly. He doesn't read it all, but he read the first 3 or 4 very quickly. And when he was done, he looked at me and said, "You're Merritt, right?" I mean, that's just clear on that. Notably, he has not yet read Biting Colder House Rules, so he's 2 books behind, and he's not here, so I can say that. Read the damn books. But that's probably just my voice. I think is very similar to hers. But everybody else is a kind of a person of their own. They spring forth like Athena from the froth and have their own personalities. And part of the goal of my editor is to make sure that when Lindsay is speaking, that it's Lindsay's voice, and that I'm not inadvertently using Mallory's voice to have things come out of Lindsay's mouth. The characters don't all kind of merge and blend together into this like Merritt sarcastic, let's talk about food mentality. So obviously, I like to talk about food. So I like food.
Do you still love? I'm sorry, this is my hand. Do you still love your characters, or after all this time, are there times where you're like, I'm over you?
No, I totally do, and that's one of the reasons why I can't even think about beginning a new series right now, is because I don't love anybody else in my head like I love Merritt and Ethan and them, and I think they're all still growing, and they all have more to give, and hopefully with each book, we've seen Merritt become a little more confident, we've seen Ethan become a little less obnoxious, and everybody kind of adapts a little bit, so they're still very fresh. I mean, maybe there will come a day when I just don't like them anymore. I'm sick of McKettrick. I find him to be irritating. Because he fights me a lot, not literally, I mean, not like I see him in my head and he's punching me, but he's so sneaky that he's a very difficult character to nail down in a book, so that's a challenge. I really like Selena, and I think she needed to die, but I wish she hadn't, because she's really cool. And I just, for reasons that should be obvious, I don't think I can pull off bringing her back to life. But she was the first bad girl that I ever imagined, so I have a soft spot. Even though she's crazy, but I like her, so. Yeah.
So when you have, and I talked to you like down in San Diego, and you said that you had the whole arc of the kind of Merritt and Ethan for the series. Now, if you're starting to write the first book, not knowing if there's going to be other books, for me, that would kind of be, if I only get 1 or 2 books out, then I'm not telling everybody the whole story. Is that, and you keep getting books added on to your contract, so is it something where it's just progressing as it goes, or are you trying to get to the end point and then you have to kind of stretch it along a little bit more?
I don't feel like I'm stretching anything. I mean, part of the challenge here, and this is one thing I hadn't really thought about when I was imagining how many books it would take, is that we are 7 books in and we are like 8 months into the series. I mean, they haven't known each other really very long at all. The first few books, first 3 or 4, take place in like 2 months. So I think the timeline seems longer because it takes longer for them to come out than it does for for things to progress. But if the end point, and ultimately the end point is, Meredith and Ethan live happily ever after, and there is, and I hope that's not a spoiler. It should be.
Oh, but what about Jonah?
Jonah, I would like to have his own happily ever after, but I don't think he's right for Meredith. I don't think there's enough there. I don't think there's enough of this, and I think she needs that. But I think it would be, because the timeline of the books is so slow, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say 8 months in, or even maybe a year and a half in, oh, well, they have all they have to tell us about their relationship. Things are done. I mean, that's just such a short amount of time for 2 people to get to know each other and fully trust each other and decide to commit to each other forever. And I'm not ruling out the possibility that there's a wrench that gets thrown into it down the road. I don't see any of those right now. Maybe something will occur to me. I'm not going to kill anybody. I've done that. So it's not so much that it gets stretched out as I grow and think about how these books are actually written, my initial timeline was just wrong. Was there another part of your question?
Well, just that, let's say the publisher's like, okay, we're not going to extend it anymore.
Sure.
Then do you feel, I need to finish this arc in my head, that's in my head and just finish it, or just kind of let it
I would
just go and leave it up to the
Dark
readers?
Elite books, there are 3, and they just stop with the expectation there would be a 4 maybe sometime down the road. But I don't wrap everything up with the assumption that there's 3 books and it's done. So what likely will happen, so there's 10 under contract, 8 is written. I will turn in 9 in July. I would expect that probably midsummer or early fall, Penguin will want to talk about future books, depending on House Rules sales and so on and so forth. So we would talk about a future contract before I have finished or even started writing the last book in the current contract. And that's usually how they have done it with me, which gives me the freedom to make sure, to not feel like I have to force a happy ending on anybody. But I still, even if they decided not to do anymore, I don't think I would, with the hope that someday they would change their minds and we would get more of them. I don't know that I would want to give up. I would, frankly, if Penguin said, we're done, I would call Random House and say, do you guys want to give it a go? Or I would, self-publishing is also an option. And again, this is all total speculation. I haven't heard anything but, positive remarks from Penguin. But there are so many options these days in terms of being able to finish the story naturally, that I don't feel any pressure to kind of wrap it up. So, yeah.
So, when you finish the first draft, like after it goes through editing, do you find that you've actually added words or lost words?
Both. I usually take out about 10 to 20 and have to add those back in. When I turn in a book, they're usually between 93 and 96,000 words. That's Penguin's estimate, basically.
So much?
Okay, what was I talking about? Penguin, 93 to 96,000 words.
What's your question again? Whether or not you can
cutting.
add them or lose them.
So I turn in the first draft as 93 to 96. I usually end up taking out, I tend to overwrite the first 100 pages or so of the book, and so a lot of stuff from there gets cut because it takes me a long time as I'm writing to kind of get to the meat of it. So I end up taking, it could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 25,000 words out. I still need to end up between 93 and 96, so I have to put them all back in. So anything that comes out, I never turn in books that are over long. I have not yet done that. If I turn in one that was 150,000 words, then we would have some serious problems, and probably they would want me to cut it. Although, as you've seen, most urban fantasy and paranormal romance series, the books just keep getting longer as the plots get more complicated. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility that they would get longer. But when you have a very, kind of a limited amount of time to write, frankly, I'm glad when I get to 95 and I can stop and see my husband for the first time in 2 months. So, yeah.
I don't know if you've already said it or I've missed it, but the shipper that works with Catcher, have you said what he is? This skinny little guy that I can't remember his name.
You should go. Have you gotten House Rules yet?
I bought House Rules today.
You should read it. That's all I'll say.
Every book is like,
Yes. You should read it. Yes.
in a perfect world, how many books would be in this series?
You know, I honestly don't know. I mean, I love J.D. Robb's In Depth series. It's fantastic. I have the next book on pre-order to arrive at my house on release day, and she's got to be 20-something into it. I don't know that I can make 20-something vampire books interesting. I think I could make 13 interesting. And by interesting, I mean I'm not rehashing the same plot. I'm not making... Ethan and Merritt right now are still working out the kinks of their relationship and getting to trust each other in a way that they can respond rationally when problems arise. They're not there yet. But I don't want to, 5 books down the road, have them throw hissy fits about things that they should have learned to deal with 5 books ago.
I'm glad you're talking about that because I just got done with book 4, and you know what happens in 4 earmuffs. And she hasn't read it yet, but I literally was in bed at like midnight reading this book, and I was like, okay, the drug, it's not right here. So I'm texting him, and he really doesn't care what I'm talking about. And then I'm like on Facebook messaging her, and I'm like, I hate you guys for this emotional stress. How dare you let me read it at night?
Those were the context of most emails that I received. And what was that? When did that one come out? Let's see. November, was it November of 2011, maybe?
No, I think that one was May.
How dare you?
Oh, yeah.
Of
Yeah,
2011.
2012, because
I know
it was
May.
6 months after the next one, maybe.
I remember it was in May. That's all I remember.
Or maybe it was 2011, yes. There were a lot of nasty emails along those lines.
That was just like,
I
why
know.
don't you guys warn me not to read it at night when I'm home alone and I'm laying there bawling and I'm like, and I was like, somebody's gonna think I'm a mess, and like, he's like, comes home, and it was like 2 hours later, and it woke me up, and I just literally was like, I can't believe she did that. And like, that's all I said, like, I know something's gonna happen, but I can't believe she did that.
I get a lot of, I threw the book across the floor, who do you think you are? My wife cried for 6 weeks. I mean, I got some very thoughtful emails, like, that was a risk, but I thought it was interesting, and I'm going to stick with you, to, that's the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and here's a list of all the bad things that have ever happened to me. I mean, I cried a lot because they were just horrible emails, and I have a thicker skin now. But, the I don't know if it's the internet age or if it's just people feel very free to tell me the things that they do and do not like about a book that is published and I cannot change, and would not change, because people's tastes are different. And ultimately I have to make the best decisions that I can,
And it gets boring if it's if
that's
everything's
the thing.
expected.
I mean,
That's what I liked about it. It wasn't expected.
Part of the issue is I think I have a lot of readers who read romance, and I have been one of those readers. And romance is very formulaic by definition. I don't consider these books to be romance, and so I don't follow the rules of romance. It's urban fantasy with a romantic thread in it. But I'm going to try to make them interesting, and I don't want to throw in twists just for the sake of kind of M. Night Shyamalan-ing everybody. And I just use that as a verb, right? But I got to write stuff that I like, that I find interesting too. And the final scene in Hard Bitten, or that particular scene that you're referring to, or I guess the subsequent scene, it's one that I'm really proud of having written because I just like it as a reader. But you got to. Ultimately, I got to make the executive decision.
Well, it makes you want to read the next one, so I'm like,
And hopefully also that too.
well, I have them all
You go back and read it, and you're like, wait, did I just?
Yeah, I got a lot of that too. And that's part of the thing of I'm not writing Game of Thrones. If these books were this long, then I could have drawn that out even more than it already was. But when it's I've got to fit it into that much space.
well, it was like, boom, done,
Yeah,
and then I was
it was
like,
pretty
no, okay, I missed something.
And I maintain that was not a cliffhanger, by the way. That issue was solved. It went in a different direction in the next book, but it's not a cliffhanger because nobody's hanging on the edge of the cliff. It's not where somebody pushes somebody over the side of a mountain and you don't know what happens. You know what happens. It's done. I just want to say that. Gotten some emails on that too. Yes.
And we only had 6 months.
I hope it's not considered a spoiler, but do you get back to the prophecy that Gabriel?
Of course. That's very
So do
important.
we actually see the results? of
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a while since I threw that. I threw that in obviously some time ago, but that is a very important part of the series and of the relationships, and that will. I haven't forgotten about it. It just hasn't that arc has not worked through its course yet. So, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I was hoping that before Selena died that Mary was going to kick her ass, but whatever happened, I said, please bring her back.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Because Selena gave her a good ass, but I felt like almost.
She really, I have written scenes actually before I had decided that she was going, that
I
was
just
going
didn't
to
feel that
occur.
Mary got her revenge, really.
Yeah,
Right,
I have
same
scenes written where Merritt, I think I have one scene written where Selena, and I can tell you this because it's not going to happen. Selena is threatening Morgan and Ethan in the library, and Merritt jumps down from the balcony wearing this red leather cat suit and basically totally kicks her butt. I hadn't thought about that though. That she won't have a chance to do that. That's unfortunate. I'll have to create another. I need to get a good female bad guy in there and let her kind of work her way.
Lacey.
Lacey, God bless her, she's not bad. She just is. She's like that girlfriend you have who just makes it worse. And you're like, he's just not that into you, and she just doesn't.
Yeah.
She doesn't see it. She doesn't get it. He's just conflicted. No. It's not, and I've been that girl, so I say that. He's not conflicted. He doesn't think you're too good for him. He just is not. But anyways, that's unfortunate because maybe I could put that up as a deleted scene since it's not going to happen. It's a good idea. I will make a note of that. Yeah.
So when you talk about seeing your husband when you have finished, what is your schedule really like? I mean, how many hours a day after you hope to work?
It depends on whether it's a good day or a bad day. What I normally do is I get home from work 6-ish, there's dinner, we don't have kids, we have fur children. We play with the dogs and do whatever stuff around the house and I'll mess around on the internet or watch TV. What I usually like to do is I'll let my husband has a man cave downstairs, so if he takes the dogs, I go upstairs to the bedroom because I like to sit cross-legged and it's more comfortable on the bed with my laptop, which is how I write, and I have Family Guy on Adult Swim, which I watch every night. I don't know why, I just do. And that's my background. And if I'm in the zone, I can do 1,500 words in an hour. So theoretically, it can go very quickly if I'm in the zone and things are kind of playing out in my head. If there's a lot of dialogue too, because dialogue goes faster, especially than fight scenes, which are the hardest thing for me to write. But that doesn't count any of the Facebooking and Twittering and making images and buying ads on Facebook and Twitter and, preparing 23 giveaways for blog tours and arranging the blog tours and all the other marketing and stuff that goes into it. Plus, there's also the reviewing covers and reviewing cover copy that goes on the covers and editing that and reviewing page proof from the last book. So it's when it's going well and I'm in the middle of writing, it can be an hour or 2 hours during the week and 5 or 6 each weekend day. But also at least another hour or two every night of marketing stuff. So
Are you thinking about your characters at work?
sometimes I'll get ideas, but I have I have an office type job and it's pretty absorbing. So, I'll get an email from my editor with something that I'll see that I'll think about and I'll talk to my colleagues about because they think it's kind of funny, but not really very often. I mean, I try to keep those two worlds separated just because I think it's safer for me to keep the day job if I do that. But also, I mean, I have discovered that I don't think I would be very good at writing all day, at being a full-time writer, because I need more of a routine and the kind of the pressure of going somewhere and doing something else. It's better for me. I'm much more productive when I'm busier than if I don't have anything to do. So I turned in Biting Bad like January the 7th or so, and other than getting marketing ready for House Rules, I haven't written anything else in the meantime, which means I have been on the couch pretty much every night after work and watched television, which is very much not me. Normally I'm doing something. I just don't like that. I don't like doing it. I would so much rather feel like I'm being productive in some way. So it depends on the day, but the marketing probably takes almost more time on a daily basis than the actual writing of the book does. Other questions?
How much space do you have on the covers?
A little bit, only on the margins. I will get a cover and someone will say, my editor will say, I really like this, but I think I want to change this color scheme from, purple to blue. And I'll say, great. And that's pretty much it. I have tried to have them put bangs on Merit, and they won't because they think it makes her look too young. No, I know. Yeah, no. It's a logical thing. She clearly has bangs, but they don't want to put them on her. I got them to give her a jacket in Biting Cold, but I couldn't get them to give her a jacket, although I may not have asked for one in House Rules, which also was in the winter time. They did put Cadigan on the column. Did you see it on the front, which made me very happy, but normally not a whole lot. I think that's true probably for most authors. We don't control pricing, and we don't control. We have a little bit of control over publication dates in a very broad sense. We don't really control covers unless you're. At the top. If you're at the top of your game, you might have some. If you're Stephen King, you can probably say what you do and don't want on a cover. But even still, I imagine it's Penguin or whoever the publisher is prepares the cover and presents it to him and says, "Do you have any objections? And if so, what are they?" And then we'll negotiate as to what we will and won't change. Just because it's expensive to have the art created in the first place and then have somebody go back and change it. So Merit's hair color on Twice Bitten was orangier even than it is in the final version, so we got her to brown it up a little bit, which was something. She still doesn't have bangs. I think in Friday Night Bites she has a Cadigan medal on, but I think that's the only book she has a Cadigan medal in. In Biting Cold, she has a ring on that's like an owl, and that was must have been what the model was wearing at the time, because Merit does not own one of those. It's very wear. So, not a lot of control.
Can you elaborate on the marketing? Because they don't do that for you.
Publishers market folks who they know if they market will get a lot of money back. Now, Penguin paid for me to be here. They fly me out here. They paid for the bookmarks. They do ads sometimes in papers. They do more publicity than they do marketing. So they will do press releases and they'll call newspapers and things like that. That's the free stuff. The marketing stuff, primarily to the extent that they have a budget, that primarily goes to very well-established authors. So they'll market True Blood because Charlene Harris is established. They know they're going to make that money back, and they have to account for it. If they spent $10,000 buying an ad for me in Book Lovers magazine, they're probably not going to get $10,000 back in sales. So the paid marketing that they do is pretty limited unless you're if you're a number one New York Times bestseller, yes. If you're anything kind of other than that, not so much. Unless if there's a particular imprint. Some publishers are different about this. Scholastic does a lot of publishing of its, it would publish maybe a fewer number of books, but it markets those books more heavily. So it just depends, too, on how many books they have coming out and how many marketing dollars they have to spread across the books. So at this point, not a lot of independent money on the marketing stuff. But then there's not a lot of marketing stuff that you can do for books other than buying ads, which you don't do very often unless it's like James Patterson has those TV commercials. But you don't see Black Dagger Brotherhood TV commercials. So the goal is to get word of mouth out, and they do that from a publicity standpoint, but not so much on the marketing. Yeah.
Would you want to have the Chicagoland put a TV series like True Blood or some of the other books that are going into movies?
If they want to pay me for it, absolutely. I think it would be really cool, and obviously it would get more people interested in the series. I think they would make a better TV series than movies, just because they're kind of episodic. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's interest in doing that. I know there's other series. I think someone told me yesterday that Stephen Spielberg had at one time optioned Kim Harrison's Hollow series, but the option expired and she got the rights back. And that's normally the way that it happens. It's not Steven Spielberg didn't call her and say, we're going to make this movie next year, here's $100,000. He says, we're going to buy the rights to make a movie, the option to make a movie within a certain period of time. Here's how much we'll pay you for it. And if they decide to exercise the option, then you go go into other kinds of negotiations. But a lot of series, I think Dark Hunters, I know there's a Nick movie now, and I think there's some other things in the works, but they had been optioned for many years, and nothing actually got made. So an option would be the first step, but that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody would make a movie. But yeah, I have no problem with that. A musical. Sure, I like Vampires a musical. That'd be fun.
Did you ever write or think of writing scripts then? If you like the dialogue writing part, did that ever?
You know, it has occurred to me recently, but my schedule right now, I'd have to quit the day job, and I would really like to not do that. So I just don't have the time. I mean, 2 books a year for the more prolific authors is really not very many, especially if they have multiple series going at a time. So, although I think that's something that would play to my strengths, but I haven't had an opportunity to kind of delve into it. I'd like to write an episode of Castle. Like, that would be fun. Except for the mystery plot, which would destroy me. But, well. Yeah.
I love the interaction between Mallory and Merritt. Their relationship is so dynamic and witty, and obviously it's a little more strained lately, but how did you come up with the inspiration for that relationship?
Man, that's a really good question. You know, I honestly don't know the answer to that. I have, growing up as we all do, I have girlfriends that kind of fade in and out, and girlfriends that you know for a really long time. And I wanted, because Merritt is going through such a weird phase and has so many people around her, especially her family, who just don't get her. I wanted to give her somebody who got her. And Mallory, I think, is that person. Now, obviously, that has, as you mentioned, their relationship is strained because of the addiction and the fact that she has to cope with it, and Merritt can't really trust her anymore to make good decisions. But I think that was generally the goal, was just to give somebody, if you're going to throw somebody into the Shark Tank, you know, give them somebody in their corner, to mix the metaphors, who they can trust and who they know will accept them even when all this other bad stuff is going on. Again, until they become horrible themselves. So, any other questions?